What happens when a late-night comedy show becomes the stage for one of the most explosive confrontations in television history? Tonight, we're diving into the shocking moment that left audiences stunned, security scrambling, and one royal guest storming off, set in absolute fury. This isn't just another celebrity interview gone wrong. This is the night Stephen Colbert pushed too far and Prince Harry reached his breaking point. Make sure to subscribe and drop a comment below, because you won't believe how this all unfolded. The Late Show with Stephen Colbert was supposed to be just another stop on Prince Harry's media tours. The Duke of Sussex had been making rounds promoting his latest charitable initiative, and Colbert's team had promised a light-hearted conversation about his new project supporting veterans with mental health resources. The audience was packed, the cameras were rolling, and everything seemed perfectly normal as Colbert delivered his opening monologue with his signature wit and charm. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Duke of Sussex, Prince Harry," Colbert announced with his trademark grin, gesturing toward the guest entrance as the studio band played a cheerful tune. Prince Harry walked out in a navy blazer and crisp white shirt, waving to the enthusiastic audience with that familiar, practiced smile. He settled into the guest chair, adjusting his posture as Colbert shuffled through his index cards. "Your Royal Highness, great to have you here," Colbert began, his tone warm and welcoming. "Now, I have to ask, when you're filling out forms, in America, do you put Prince in the title field, or do you just go with Mr. B?" Audience chuckled, and Harry laughed along. "You know, Stephen, I usually just go with Harry these days. Keeps things simple." "Simple, I like that," Colbert nodded. "Speaking of simple, let's talk about this new veterans program you're launching. Tell us what inspired you to focus on mental health support specifically." Harry's expression grew more serious, his hands clasping together as he leaned forward slightly. "Well, having served myself, I know firsthand how challenging the transition back to civilian life can be. When you've seen combat, when you've lost brothers and sisters in arms, coming home doesn't automatically heal those wounds. We need comprehensive support systems that address not just the physical injuries, but the psychological ones too." "That's incredibly important work," Colbert said, his voice sincere. "And I imagine your own experiences with therapy and mental health advocacy informed this project quite a bit." "Absolutely," Harry replied. "I've been very open about my own journey with therapy, and I think it's crucial that we normalize these conversations, especially for men who might feel like seeking help is somehow a sign of weakness." Colbert nodded thoughtfully, then glanced down at his cards. "Now, Harry, I have to ask about something that's been in the news lately. There's been quite a bit of discussion about your relationship with certain members of your family, particularly regarding some recent comments you made in interviews." The temperature in the room seemed to shift slightly. Harry's smile remained, but something in his eyes changed. "Stephen, I've always tried to be honest about my experiences while still respecting my family's privacy." Of course, Colbert said, waving his hand casually. "But I'm curious, when you talk about stepping back from royal duties to protect your family's mental health, some people wonder if that's really about protection, or if it's more about, well, let's call it creative differences with the institution." Harry's jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly. "I think anyone who's followed my story knows that the decision to step back wasn't made lightly. It was about creating a healthier environment for my wife and children." "Right, your wife Meghan Colbert," continued, his tone still conversational, but with an edge that hadn't been there before. "She's certainly been a controversial figure in the British press. Some people love her, others, well, they've had some pretty harsh things to say. Do you think she knew what she was getting into when she married into the royal family?" The audience was quiet now, sensing the shift in energy. Harry's posture had straightened, and his hands were no longer clasped casually in his lap. "Stephen, with all due respect, I think we should focus on the veterans program we're here to discuss," Harry said, his voice measured but firm. "Oh, come on, Harry," Colbert said with a laugh that didn't quite reach his eyes. "The American people are fascinated by this stuff. I mean, here you are, a real-life prince who gave up his crown for love. It's like a fairy tale, except instead of living happily ever after, you're doing interviews explaining why your family doesn't understand you." The studio fell completely silent. Even the camera operators seemed to freeze as they watched the tension build between the two men. Harry's voice was low when he spoke again. "Stephen, I came here tonight to talk about supporting veterans who've sacrificed everything for their countries. If you're more interested in tabloid gossip than discussing how we can help people who are struggling with PTSD and depression, then maybe we should end this conversation now." Colbert leaned back in his chair, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. "Whoa, easy there, Your Highness. I'm just asking the questions that people want answers to. Isn't that what these interviews are about? Being transparent with the public. Transparency about my work." "Yes," Harry replied, his voice growing colder. "Not about personal family matters that have been twisted and sensationalized by people who have no idea what they're talking about." But Harry Colbert pressed on, clearly enjoying the discomfort he was creating. "You've written books about it. You've done multiple interviews about it. You've literally built a career out of talking about your family drama. And now you're upset when someone asks follow-up questions." That was the moment everything changed. Harry's face flushed red, and when he spoke, his voice carried an edge that made everyone in the studio sit up straighter. "Career out of family drama," Harry repeated slowly. "Stephen, I've spent my entire adult life serving my country, supporting charitable causes, and trying to make a positive difference in the world. The fact that you would reduce my life's work to family drama shows exactly the kind of ignorance and disrespect that made me realize I needed to step away from this toxic environment in the first place." Colbert's eyebrows shot up, and he glanced toward his producers offstage before turning back to Harry with renewed intensity. "Oh, so now I'm ignorant?" Colbert shot back, his comedic facade completely dropping. "Harry, I've been doing this job for decades. I've interviewed presidents, world leaders, Nobel Prize winners. I think I know how to ask tough questions without being ignorant." Harry stood up from his chair, towering over the desk as his voice rose. "Tough questions? You call reducing my military service and charitable work to tabloid gossip tough journalism? That's not journalism, Stephen. That's entertainment. At the expense of people's real lives and real pain." The audience was completely silent now, some people shifting uncomfortably in their seats as they watched this unprecedented confrontation unfold. Colbert's producers were frantically whispering into their headsets, but the host seemed determined to push forward. "Sit down," Harry Colbert said, gesturing to the chair with forced calm. "Let's have a civilized conversation here." "Civilized?" Harry laughed bitterly, but remained standing. "There's nothing civilized about what you're doing. You invited me here under false pretenses, promised we'd discuss veterans' mental health, and instead you're trying to bait me into giving you sound bites about my family for your ratings." Colbert's mask slipped further, revealing genuine irritation. "Look, Prince Harry, you don't get to come on my show and dictate what questions I can and cannot ask. This isn't the BBC where you get softball interviews from people who curtsy when you walk in the room. Excuse me." Harry's voice was dangerously quiet now. "Did you just suggest that I expect special treatment because of my title? I'm suggesting that you seem pretty comfortable criticizing institutions until someone asks you to be accountable for your own actions," Colbert replied, leaning forward aggressively. "You've spent years complaining about the royal family, about the British press, about how unfairly you've been treated. But the minute someone asks you a direct question about it, you want to shut down the conversation." Harry's hands were clenched at his sides now. "Stephen, I've been more transparent about my struggles, my mistakes, and my growth than probably any public figure in recent memory. I've talked openly about my mental health, my grief, my failures as a husband and father. What I won't do is sit here and let you turn my family's pain into a punchline for your monologue tomorrow night." "Family's pain," Colbert scoffed. "Harry, you literally went on international television and accused your family of racism. You've written books describing private conversations. You've done interviews where you've thrown your father and brother under the bus. And now you're lecturing me about respecting family privacy?" The words hit Harry like a physical blow. His face went completely white, then flushed red again as he stepped closer to Colbert's desk. "How dare you?" Harry said, his voice shaking with rage. "How dare you sit there and trivialize what my family went through? My wife was suicidal. Stephen, she was getting death threats daily. Our son was being subjected to racist commentary before he was even born. We tried to work within the system, tried to find solutions, tried to protect ourselves while still serving the crown. And when none of that worked, when it became clear that the institution cared more about protecting abusers and covering up scandals than protecting us, we made the difficult decision to leave. Colbert wasn't backing down. But you didn't just leave quietly, did you, Harry? You turned your departure into a media spectacle. You've done more interviews in the past 3 years than some celebrities do in their entire careers. If you wanted privacy, you could have just stepped away and stayed quiet. We tried staying quiet, Harry exploded, slamming his hand on Colbert's desk with such force that the coffee mug jumped. We tried the quiet diplomacy route for years, while my wife was being destroyed in the press and my family did nothing to defend her. We tried working behind the scenes while racist headlines ran unchallenged and palace sources leaked lies about us to their favorite journalists. The only reason we started speaking publicly was because the alternative was watching my wife destroy herself rather than fight back against the lies. The studio was in complete shock. Camera operators were looking to their directors for guidance. Audience members were recording on their phones, and Colbert's production team was clearly in panic mode. But Colbert himself seemed energized by the confrontation. "So this is all about Meghan then," Colbert pressed. "Everything you've done, leaving your family, leaving your country, abandoning your royal duties, it's all because your wife couldn't handle the pressure of being a princess." That was the final straw. Harry's composure completely shattered as he leaned over the desk, getting within inches of Colbert's face. "Don't you ever speak about my wife that way again. Meghan is the strongest person I know. She survived things that would have broken most people, and she did it with grace and dignity while being systematically destroyed by people who couldn't stand seeing a successful, intelligent, independent woman join their little club." Colbert didn't flinch. "Harry, you're proving my point here. You're completely losing control because someone asked you uncomfortable questions about your choices. If you can't handle basic scrutiny, how did you think you were going to handle being a working royal?" Basic scrutiny. Harry stood up straight, his voice rising to a shout. "You call racist coverage and death threats basic scrutiny. You call fabricated stories and invasion of privacy basic scrutiny. Stephen, my mother died because of this same toxic media culture that you're perpetuating right here, right now, and you have the audacity to suggest that we should have just accepted it." The mention of Diana brought a gasp from the audience. Colbert's expression flickered for just a moment, but he pressed on relentlessly. "Your mother's situation was completely different, and you know it," Colbert said coldly. "Diana was trapped in an unhappy marriage with no way out. You had choices, Harry. You could have stayed and worked to change things from within. Instead, you ran away and then spent years complaining about the people you left behind." Harry's face turned a deep shade of crimson as he processed what Colbert had just said about his mother. The silence in the studio was deafening, broken only by the quiet hum of the cameras that were still rolling. Unprecedented meltdown. "Don't you dare," Harry said, his voice dropping to a whisper that was somehow more terrifying than his previous shouting. "Don't you dare compare my situation to my mother's and suggest that I'm weak for protecting my family. My mother didn't have choices, because people like you, people in your industry, hounded her to death. They followed her everywhere, made up stories about her, invaded every aspect of her privacy until she couldn't breathe. And you think I should have just stayed and let them do the same thing to my wife and children?" Colbert shifted uncomfortably in his chair for the first time, but his producer was frantically gesturing for him to keep going, clearly recognizing the ratings gold they were witnessing. "Harry, I'm not attacking your mother's memory," Colbert said, though his tone had lost some of its earlier aggression. "I'm just pointing out that you had options she didn't have. You could have used your position to change things." "Change things?" Harry let out a harsh laugh. "Stephen, do you have any idea how the royal institution actually works? Do you think I can just waltz into Buckingham Palace and rewrite centuries of protocol because I don't like how the press treats my family? The institution protects itself above all else, even if it means sacrificing the people within it. I learned that lesson watching my mother get fed to the wolves, and I refuse to let history repeat itself with my wife. But by leaving you, abandoned your duty," Colbert pressed, seeming to regain his confidence. "You took the privileges of being royal but walked away from the responsibilities." Harry slammed both hands on the desk now, his face inches from Colbert's. "Abandoned my duty. I served 2 tours in Afghanistan, I've raised hundreds of millions for charity. I've dedicated my entire adult life to service, but apparently none of that matters to you because I chose to protect my family instead of feeding them to the same machine that killed my mother." "Harry, you need to calm down," Colbert said, but there was a note of uncertainty in his voice now as he glanced toward his security team. "Calm down." Harry's voice cracked with emotion. "You spend 20 minutes attacking everything I stand for, insulting my wife, trivializing my mother's death, and now you want me to calm down. This is exactly the problem, Stephen. You media vultures think you can say whatever you want about people's lives, their families, their pain, and then act surprised when someone finally calls you out on it." The audience was completely frozen, some people holding their phones up to record, while others seemed too shocked to move. Colbert's band leader was making subtle hand gestures toward the security guards positioned around the studio. "A vulture," Harry Colbert said, his voice finally showing some defensiveness. "I'm a talk show host, doing my job." "Your job," Harry straightened up, his voice filled with disgust. "Your job is to destroy people for entertainment. Your job is to take someone who came here to talk about helping veterans and turn it into a circus about family drama. If that's your job, Stephen, then your job is everything that's wrong with modern media." Colbert stood up now to matching Harry's aggressive posture. "You know what, Harry? Maybe you're right. Maybe I am everything that's wrong with media. But at least I'm honest about what I do. I don't pretend to be some noble humanitarian while cashing checks from Netflix and Spotify for telling family secrets." The studio erupted in audible gasps. Several audience members stood up, and the tension was so thick it felt like the air itself might explode. Harry's security detail, who had been standing discreetly in the wings, started moving closer to the stage. "Family secrets." Harry's voice was deadly quiet again. "You think sharing our truth about racism, mental health struggles, and institutional failures is cashing in on family secrets? Stephen, those aren't secrets. They're realities that millions of people face every day. And the only reason they were secrets in the first place is because institutions like the one I left are more interested in protecting their image than protecting the people within them." "Oh, please," Colbert scoffed, his own composure completely gone now. "You're not some civil rights hero, Harry. You're a privileged prince who got his feelings hurt and decided to burn down his family's reputation for revenge." That was the breaking point. Harry's face contorted with rage as he swept his arm across Colbert's desk, sending papers, pens, and the coffee mug flying. The crash echoed through the studio as the mug shattered against the floor. "Privileged?" Prince Harry roared, his voice carrying across the entire studio. "You have no idea what privilege cost me, Stephen. It cost me my mother. It cost me a normal childhood. It cost me the ability to grieve privately. It cost me relationships, mental health, and nearly cost me my wife and children. So don't you dare stand there and lecture me about privilege when you've built your entire career on making jokes about other people's pain." Security guards were moving in now, but Harry held up a hand to his own protection team, signaling them to stay back. His chest was heaving as he stared down at Colbert, who had gone pale. "You know what the real tragedy is, Stephen?" Harry continued, his voice shaking with emotion. "I came here tonight genuinely excited to talk about helping veterans, people who've sacrificed everything for their countries and are struggling with invisible wounds. Instead, you turned it into this spectacle, this circus. Those veterans deserved better. They deserved to have their stories heard, their struggles acknowledged, their service honored. But you were more interested in cheap shots and gotcha moments." Harry started removing his microphone, his hands trembling with rage. "You want to know what privilege really is, Stephen? Privilege is being able to sit behind that desk and attack people's families, their trauma, their deepest pain, and call it entertainment. Privilege is never having to worry about whether your words might push someone over the edge, whether your jokes might cost someone their life." Colbert opened his mouth to respond, but Harry cut him off with a sharp gesture. "No, I'm done," Harry said, dropping his microphone on the chair. "I'm done with people like you who think other people's suffering is content for your show. I'm done with a media culture that values clicks over compassion, ratings over responsibility, and I'm especially done with people who invoke my mother's memory to score points in an argument." Harry turned toward the audience, his voice carrying clearly without the microphone. "To everyone here tonight, I apologize that you had to witness this. You came for entertainment and ended up seeing something ugly. That's not your fault, it's his." He pointed directly at Colbert, who was still standing behind his desk, looking stunned. "And Stephen, the next time you want to interview someone about their charitable work, maybe try actually caring about the cause instead of using it as a setup for your real agenda." With that, Prince Harry strode off the stage, his security team quickly flanking him as he disappeared into the wings. The studio fell into complete silence, except for the sound of his footsteps echoing in the corridor backstage. Colbert stood, frozen behind his desk for several long seconds before finally addressing his shell-shocked audience and cameras, but the damage was done, the interview was over, and television history had been made in the most explosive way possible. So there you have it, the night Stephen Colbert pushed a prince too far and learned that some lines should never be crossed. What do you think? Did Harry have every right to lose his temper, or should he have kept his cool? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more incredible stories like this one.